Hello, everyone. This is Wayne Howell, your host for the next half hour, once again inviting you to check your musical favorites against the favorites of the famous. Today, we're going to do a little tune detecting with a man who's perhaps best known for his screen and radio portrayals of one of the great detectives of all time, Sherlock Holmes. Our guest, of course, is the distinguished actor, Mr. Basil Rathbone, who's currently starring on Broadway in S.N. Berman's new comedy, Jane. Hello, Mr. Rathbone, and welcome to Favorites of the Famous.
Hello.
Mr. Rathbone, I don't imagine there's any mystery about your being a music lover, is there?
No, there's no mystery about it, I shouldn't think.
What about the fabulous Mr. Holmes, with whom you're so closely associated? Was music appreciation among his many talents, too?
Oh, yes, indeed. In fact, Mr. Holmes owned a Stradivarius.
He did?
He was a very fine player. He was not just an amateur. I mean, he didn't play professionally, we know that. But Conan Doyle makes a point of Sherlock Holmes being a very expert violinist. Mm-hmm. His particular appreciation, according to Mr. Conan Doyle, and exactly what he means by it, I don't know, was medieval music. I called up Stokowski and asked him what he meant by it. He said it must be either Purcell or Corelli.
I see. Then he really was a professional in the real sense of the word.
Pre-Bach.
Do you play any musical instruments yourself?
I regret to say no. I started out with the piano, got lost in football and field games.
Medieval football.
Medieval football, and I'm sorry to say I couldn't regret it more. I don't play an instrument myself.
Any musicians in your family, perhaps?
Well, I wouldn't say any musicians of any note. My daughter is a charming pianist, and nearly all my family on both sides, my mothers and fathers, have always liked music. My mother played the violin, her sister played the piano. They played sonatas together. There has been music in the family, yes, but not professionally.
Sort of like the Kaltenborn clan. Mr. Kaltenborn plays the drums and his wife plays the piano.
Yes,
strictly for their own ears.
That's right.
Can you remember the first concert or musical event you ever attended?
Now, that's very difficult because I came to London from South Africa, where I was born, at a very early age, and I couldn't remember exactly what the first concert would be. But it, in all probability, took place in the famous Queen's Hall, destroyed in World War I, and a famous conductor called Wood. But I don't remember. No, I couldn't be specific because I was probably 8, 9, 10 years old.
In other words, as long as you can remember, you've been hearing.
As long as I can remember, I have always been taken by my father and mother, and then later gone myself, to the best music.
A few moments ago, you mentioned the fact that Sherlock Holmes played the violin. Do you have a special violin favorite?
Well, yes. As a matter of fact, if I wanted to hear one over and over and over again, it would be the Tchaikovsky Violin Concerto in D.
Well, Basil Rathbone, let's listen then to one of your favorites. The famous second movement is played by Misha Mishakov with the RCA Victor Orchestra, conducted by Eric Leinsdorf. Misha Mishakov and the RCA Victor Orchestra gave us the second movement of Tchaikovsky's Violin Concerto in D, one of Basil Rathbone's musical favorites. Mr. Rathbone, we were speaking a few minutes ago about the characterizations of Sherlock Holmes, for which you're so famous. Actually, of course, you've enjoyed a long and brilliant stage career. When and where did you make your debut in the theater?
Well, now you're asking me pretty well to give away my age, and I'm not going to. I made my debut a very long time ago in a small town called Ipswich in England, and I played Hortensio in The Taming of the Shrew. At that time, I was with an English repertory Shakespeare company, and we toured 16 plays, and that was quite an education.
How do you feel about an acting career in school? Is that how you began yours?
No, I believe, and I'm trying to follow through with my child, my daughter, I think that children should enjoy their school, and if they like to play around with, I call play around with the theater, or play around with music, or play around with art, unless they are peculiarly talented or show some most exceptional talent, I think that a child, but even then, I would say, I would prefer that my child had his or her childhood and then faced up with their professional career afterwards. There's plenty of time to become a professional after you've reached, what, should we say the age 16 or 17?
Is that so? I should have think that you would have to start schooling for this type of work that you do early.
No, you're not ready for it. You're simply not ready for it. I've known many young actors. I can take you Freddie Bartholomew as an example. Or I will give you any child actor, and I hope the child actors' mothers and fathers and the child actors and actresses themselves won't mind my saying this. They are not actors. They are just little child mimics.
They're aping what they've seen on the screen.
Yes, there's a lot of talent, but how much of it comes through when they grow up?
I know you eventually became quite a Shakespearean expert. How many different Shakespearean roles would you say you've done?
Well, I know exactly. I've played 47 parts in 22 plays.
For goodness sakes. I believe you also played Shakespeare in a Theater in the Round production.
Yes,
too.
I had the honor of being the first actor to appear in Theater Around here in New York. We did Julius Caesar at the in the Edison Hotel. Let me see, that was 2 years ago.
Yes.
Very successfully indeed.
Which do you think makes for better theater? Conventional staging with the audience in front of the players, or Theater in the Round with the audience surrounding
I don't
the
think
actors?
that's an easy question to answer, because I think certain plays are benefited by Theater in the Round, and others are very difficult to do in the round. Let me say that if you have a somewhat static play, such as The Heiress, in which I played 2 to 3 years ago, where the whole play takes place in a drawing room, and the furniture and chairs and tables, etc., are in a particular position, it's tough on an audience because it's difficult to move the players around. But Shakespeare is, and Shaw in some cases, is very well adapted to Theater in the Round because you can keep your people moving.
Surely. In the last 5 years or so, I believe you've been devoting your time to Broadway. And as you mentioned before, The Heiress, of course, Obsession, Julius Caesar, and now Jane. Could you tell our listeners something about Jane?
Well, now, Jane is a very amusing play. It's a short story by Somerset Maugham, and it is adapted to the stage by our famous, perhaps the most famous, writer of brilliant dialogue, Mr. S.N. Berman. It's a comedy. There are in the play some 300-odd laughs, which is quite a change for me after, as you just mentioned, Julius Caesar, The Heiress. I usually play rather heavy plays, and it's a great joy to not only hear an audience laugh, but to be able to laugh oneself.
I'm sure it is.
It's a delightful play. Its story is very frail. That is not important. The story is not important in this case. It is just that people seem to come to the theater and go out with a sense of well-being.
Being a music lover, I know you relax off stage by enjoying some of your favorites. When do you usually prefer to listen to music? Do you have
Well, as a
preference
matter of fact, yes. I find that the most enjoyable time is while I'm making up, because I'm very quiet and I can turn on my radio in the dressing room, and I can play myself music for an hour and a half. And that's where I get most quiet and where I can really listen.
Well, since you're off stage now, Basil Rathbone, even though you're not making up, I've a hunch you wouldn't mind hearing another of your favorites. What'll it be?
Well, you know, it looks bad, doesn't it? I'm going to Tchaikovsky again. I'd like that piano concerto. Do you happen to have, by any chance, the piano concerto of Tchaikovsky with Horowitz playing and Toscanini conducting?
I just happen to have that right by my side.
Oh, isn't that wonderful? Let's play that, shall
All
we?
right, we have it right here in the music room, so let's listen to the third movement of the Tchaikovsky First Piano Concerto right now. Vladimir Horowitz at the piano with Arturo Toscanini conducting the NBC Symphony with their RCA Victor recording of the third movement of Tchaikovsky's Piano Concerto in B-flat minor. Basil Rathbone, I know that your visits to concert halls have not only been as a listener, but as a narrator as well. Could you tell us something about your activities in that field?
Well, yes. I think possibly the most exciting event was in Chicago under the with Piemonteur and the San Francisco Symphony Orchestra, when we did the whole of Schumann's Manfred. It was played in the big civic auditorium there, which held 7,029 people. It ran for 1 hour and 40 minutes, and nobody got up and walked out. It is a magnificent work. It is very rarely heard. The only thing that is played, which we know well, is, of course, the overture to Manfred.
Sure.
But the whole work is simply magnificent. And, of course, last year I did The Nightingale and the Rose with the Philadelphia Symphony Orchestra in Carnegie Hall and in Philadelphia. And then, of course, Peter and the Wolf.
I was waiting for you to say that, because
Well,
the
that was
children of this
done.
country love it.
That was done. I did that with Piemonteur on the coast, and of course, it's been recorded.
Very excellent, too. Have you ever had a desire to do any writing?
Well, yes, I have written quite a great deal. I've never had very much published. The only thing that is of any note that has been published was a little story that I wrote about Mr. Sherlock Holmes.
Have you ever done any musical composing?
No, I haven't. I don't know enough about it to do that.
Judging from the musical selections we played thus far, I'm sure that Tchaikovsky is one of your favorite composers, but do you have any others?
Oh, many. I couldn't live without Schumann music. I'm devoted to Brahms. I like the number one of Shostakovich. I like the classic symphony of Prokofiev very much. Those are two moderns, so that you don't think I'm entirely old-fashioned.
Sure.
Rachmaninoff, I don't think yet has taken his proper place amongst the greats. And, of course, Beethoven.
Well, suppose you select your next musical favorite from that group of composers, if you would.
Well, now, I don't know what the German for it is, but it's called Kindersehnen.
Yes,
There,
surely.
Kindersehnen by Schumann, and there's a wonderful record by Horowitz.
Since, as we just pointed out, you're no novice as a musical narrator, perhaps you could tell us a little more about them.
Well, no, Mr. Schumann does give a little story with it, but I'm not particularly concerned with what they're supposed to be. In this case, I am intrigued by the beautiful melodic line.
Because it's one of your musical favorites, let's listen to Vladimir Horowitz's RCA Victor recording of the last three parts of the Kindersehnen: Frightening, Child Falling Asleep, and The Poet Speaks. Well, now, Mr. Rathbone, to get away from music for just a moment, I know that you're here to speak for a very worthy cause.
Yes, I'd like to talk about an internationally famous tuberculosis hospital, the Denver Sanatorium, JCRS. I was appalled on learning the number of young people who die each year because of the lack of proper treatment for their tuberculosis. Young men and women in the prime of life struck down, sometimes never knowing about their condition, but more usually unable to avail themselves of the proper medical treatment. Now, the Denver Sanatorium out west is free and takes in just such cases sick young people from all over the country without ability to pay for the costly care necessary. Need is the only currency there. It's completely non-sectarian. Tuberculosis is not cured by pills. Tuberculosis is cured by a rather lengthy and costly process. Please send your contributions today, every one of you listening in, won't you, to the Denver Sanatorium, Spivak, Colorado.
Thank you, Mr. Rathbone. Well, we've brought you your favorite music on RCA Victor Red Seal Records. Did you enjoy the performances?
I did, and I thank you very much for allowing me to choose these pieces.
Well, I'm sure our listeners enjoyed hearing you, and I urge those of them who haven't already enjoyed your delightful new hit, Jane, at the Coronet Theater in New York, to see it if they possibly can. And thank you very much for stopping by to visit with us.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you very much indeed.
And now, ladies and gentlemen, this is Wayne Howell, your host on Favorites of the Famous, inviting you to join us again next week at this same time. Till then, thanks for listening, and goodbye.